gone back to the app on the iPad. Some people are having problems with the video freezing, so I'm not sure what's going on there, but maybe this is working out a bit better. This is the usual way I do it. So yeah, if you can see this chat, let me know and leave a message. Hopefully everything is coming through here. Turning the chat on. Okay. All right, so as I mentioned in a previous live video, I'm going to be selling off my entire record collection, and it's a tough choice. And Whimsical Goldie, hi, how are you doing? And I have already talked about this on a previous video, and I think I mentioned that this is a collection going back from, I think, 1977, mostly till around the mid-'80s, and then there's a few purchases I made years later. But most of the collection is 70s, 60s, a little bit 60s, 70s, 80s. Now, all these albums were really well cared for. I was extremely picky about how I stored my records. Well, at least with the vinyl. I mean, the sleeves have the usual storage wear. And my first album was purchased in 77, and then my main phase of buying was like 78 to the mid-'80s, and then the CDs came in. So I've already sold off chunks of this over eBay like years ago, and but I still got a lot left, and also a huge soundtrack collection, which I think I went through in a previous video. Now, if you want to see the list of these albums, in the description of this video, there is a link that will take you to a Patreon post, and that will show every album alphabetically. Now, that's a public view post. I tried to put it into the YouTube description here, but there's just too much, can only handle a certain amount of characters. So that's where you can see the list, and it is alphabetical. So if you're interested in anything, just shoot me an email at Shatnershairpiece@yahoo.com. That'll be the quickest way. And I mentioned the shipping cost for one album was about $20. So I just picked the farthest distance from Vancouver, which would be Florida. So that would be one album in a flat, solid cardboard mailer. Now, it probably won't get much higher than that when you put multiple albums, I guess, depending on how many albums. So obviously, if it's like 6 albums, that will add a bit of more weight. But obviously, it would be more cost effective to get more than one album shipped. So that's where the list is. And I'm going to start today just going through, I think I can maybe do A through F, we'll see. And go one by one through these albums. I've already did the soundtrack list, so look at my previous video for that, where I went through every soundtrack album. So I'm going to start off now with the first one, and it's Greatest Hits, Volume 2. This is actually quite a rare one because it's also German pressing. You can see it on the bottom there. It says it somewhere. Yeah, right down here. West Germany. So this is a Polydor album, and I think that's courtesy of my wife's collection. So she got that when she was a teenager. So next up is Aerosmith. This is an original pressing from Canada. It's the Toys in the Attic album, which was a very popular album when I was in school. So around 75, when I was about 13, this was always played at school dances. Walk This Way, Sweet Emotion. I still distinctly remember hearing that at school dances, along with Sweet, Fox on the Run, Ballroom Blitz. So that was pretty big. So that is Canadian pressing. And say most of my albums are always stored in plastic. I got lots of plastic sleeves. So the conditions on most of my albums would be excellent to near mint in some cases where they might have only been played a couple times before I ended up recording them, which is usually what I did. I would get the album and then quickly transfer it to cassette, so then I could store the album and not have to worry about it being degraded. So that's Aerosmith, and then I've got more Aerosmith. This is the 1976 album Rocks, which is generally considered their best album. Fortunately, this one doesn't have an inner sleeve. I think there was, I don't know why this doesn't have the inner sleeve, but that is definitely their strongest album. It's a classic, and that is, again, is a Canadian pressing, and that was 76. And then I have the 77 album, Draw the Line, which is cool artwork on there. This has like my favorite Aerosmith song, Kings and Queens, beginning of side 2. Absolutely love that song. It's epic. And the final Aerosmith album I have is Night in the Ruts, or as they used to say, Right in the Nuts, but they couldn't print that on there. So this one also includes the original inner sleeve with the product placements that you could buy Aerosmith merchandise. So again, excellent condition or near mint. Next up is a classic Canadian band called A Foot in Cold Water. I used to read Cream magazine back in the late 70s. That was a classic American rock magazine, you know, better than Rolling Stone. I mean, they had a few out of that. It was like Hit Parade, which I used to get. But Cream was my favorite. And Cream generally hated Canadians. They used to laugh at bands like Rush. I love the smell of old albums. Yes. Yeah, there's definitely a smell, but as long as it's not, you know, a damp smell, that's the main thing. So, Foot in Cold Water, one of the few bands that used to always get raves in Cream magazine, and they were very picky about music. They generally laughed at Canadian bands, and I remember they didn't like Rush, they didn't like Crime, but they had a lot of respect for Foot in Cold Water, and deservedly so. Classic group. This is, I think, volume 2. They had that hit, what was it called? It's actually not on here, is it? Okay. Yeah, but check them out. Great group. There's a close-up of the band. Huey Legat was in there. So, sort of, I'm not really super well-known Canadian band, but they definitely deserve the acclaim that they got. Here's an old one, Alaska. This was featuring Bernie Marsden, who was most well-known with Whitesnake during their prime, like 77 to 82 or so, before Coverdale fired everybody and got a bunch of pretty boys in the band. And that, to me, was sort of when the band went downhill, when everybody looked like a girl. You know, like Steve Vai and Adrian Vandenberg. I mean, that was their most popular phase, but I did not really care for that phase of Whitesnake. I preferred the phase with the Bernie Marsden and Mickey Moody on guitars. And this was his band from, what year was this? This is actually mid-80s, so this was post-Whitesnake. Next up, I've got a classic from Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass, The Greatest Hits. I'm not sure when this came out, but it is a gatefold. This could be a 60s album. I'm not sure when they released this, because most of their hits were from the 60s. And again, as usual, there's oftentimes never a year of release. That's what bugged me about some of these albums. It's A&M, but there is no release date on it anywhere. Canadian pressing. I grew up with this kind of music. My dad always played Herb Alpert, so I was very familiar with everything from Herb Alpert. And then, of course, I've got this one. There's a classic from the 60s. and Whipped Cream and Other Delights, a much parodied album cover. I mean, everybody's, or many bands have parodied this, and yeah, it was quite hilarious. So that is, again, a Canadian pressing. Next up, we got a classic from the Allman Brothers. This is I think this was post the death of Dwayne Allman, I believe. First album they made after he died. So that is the gatefold. And that's a great shot in there of everybody in the family. So this, I think, was 73. Yeah, it's got Ramblin' Man on there. So yeah, that's their biggest hit from Dickie Betts. And this is a, again, Canadian pressing on Capricorn. It's my only Allman Brothers album. Oh, here's another rare one. I don't know how this ended up in my collection, probably because I thought it would be rare and I picked it up somewhere. Apollonia 6 was the name of the group. She was with Prince, and this is her album from, what year was this? 84? I think this is quite rare. I don't even know if you can get this on Spotify. I haven't checked, but she had Happy Birthday, Mr. Christian, Blue Limousine. So yeah, for people who are into Prince and 80s music, that's definitely a keeper. Here's another Canadian classic, a great band, April Wine, and they are really underrated band. They had a few hits, mostly in the 70s, that there were more mellower songs, like, let me see here. What was the hit? You Won't Dance With Me. I remember that on the radio. Tonight Is a Wonderful Time to Fall in Love. So they had the mellow hits, and they also had the rock songs that were great, like Ooh What a Night, Roller, Could Have Been a Lady. So yeah, they had a lot of airplay in Canada, and I think they still do. But I sort of lost track of them around, I think, 1980. That was probably the last time I bought an album from them. Here's a guitar player. I don't even really know who this guy is, and I just picked it up probably because it's a direct-to-disc recording. Lorindo Almeida, Virtuoso Guitar, limited edition. This is from 77, so you can look that one up. Now here comes a couple of my all-time favorite records. And this is a band called Automatic Man. This was released in 76. Now, you might have seen some of my videos on YouTube where I am showing you live gigs and asking you who did this song or where's this song from. And one of the recent ones was us covering a song from Automatic Man. It was from this album, and it was really hard to guess because this is so obscure and has never been released. Well, it hasn't been properly released on CD. There are bootlegs that are vinyl rips of this that ended up on CD. But again, you can't even get this on Spotify. Now, the reason that I love this band is that it has one of my favorite guitarists, Pat Thrall, who I've actually been in contact with over email. I used to send him recordings of me doing old songs from Hugh's Thrall album and things like this, and stuff that I had done with my wife, and let him listen to it because he was, available through email, and I got to talk to him a bit. But he started with this band, and then he ended up joining Pat Travers' band in '78, another classic band from Canada. He was with them through their 1980 period, Crash and Burn, and Snorting Whiskey, Drinking Cocaine was the big Pat Travers song on the radio. Now, I've also been in contact with the bass player, Donnie Harvey, but that was about 10 years ago. He actually saw some of the videos I made where I'm playing guitar and my wife is singing, and we're doing Automatic Man songs on YouTube. And he actually left a positive comment about that. And I was like, wow, it's the bass player from Automatic Man. I talked to him a bit and asked him if he had any live recordings of the band. And he said he had, but that's as far as conversation went. And then he died shortly after that. So that was a real shame. And he was only on this first album from '76. The drummer is Michael Shreve, and he was with Santana. The first albums of Santana. I think he lasted a few years with them. And this is, I guess, Bayet or Bayete. He's the main writer, keyboard player. Like I said, all brilliant musicians. Absolute classic album. It's like a desert island album for me, and I've like learned every song on here. And it even has a lyric sheet here. It's like prog funk rock. Prince was influenced by this, most definitely, and that's generally considered the best of their two albums. Their second album is Visitors. This got into a little more sort of a dance funk feel to it. It was a little more upbeat. Most people seem to prefer the first album, but I actually really like the second one as well. And sometimes I listen to this more. The mood of the album is a bit different. And again, they had changed bass players at this point and the drummer. But again, it didn't sell, and then the band broke up. They had a hard time putting their sound across live. I've played almost all the songs from this and some from this as well. So really hard to find these albums. And up next we have Average White Band. This is with Ben E. King. And this is a 1977 album. I don't think I've ever listened to this. Here's another classic from that you probably don't know about, Backstreet Crawler. This is a band that was formed by Paul Kossoff, who was the guitar player for Free, which is the band that did All Right Now. Many people confuse that song with Bad Company. It's not Bad Company, it's Free. And that was like 1970. So that still gets a lot of radio play. Paul Kossoff tragically died when he was about 26 from drugs. And that wasn't long after this album came out, I think the same year. So this, I think they did like 2 albums, and this might have been the second one. So if you're into Paul Kossoff's guitar playing, this is definitely a great one. And very underrated player. He's done some really amazing stuff. Free is one of my all-time favorite bands, with Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke. So it was like half of Bad Company. From Free, they went on to Bad Company. It was the drummer and Paul Rodgers. And then they tried to continue working with Paul Kossoff, but he was already in the middle of heavy drug addiction, and they couldn't make it work. So yeah, another tragic guitar player that died way too young. Next up, we have my Bad Company collection. So I think I already sold the first album, but I have Straight Shooter from '75. This has got the Shooting Star song and Good Lovin' Gone Bad, and Feel Like Making Love. Of course, that was an FM staple. So this also has the inner sleeve. It's pretty cool. There's like a back shot of the band and the front shot. So, Bad Company borrowed heavily from Free. They were obviously heavily influenced by Free, especially Mick Ralphs, the guitar player. So I have all their albums, and the next one is Running with the Pack. That was '76. And then there was Burning Sky, which is also a gatefold. And this is one I probably used to put this on my wall. I'm sure I did. And then the classic Desolation Angels, which was '79. This was already looked at like somewhat of a comeback album. That's another classic Hypnosis cover, which you can never understand what they mean. They did a lot of albums in the '70s. So this was Rock and Roll Fantasy, Gone, 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 Evil Wind. Half of this album was on the radio. So that is the original one that I bought in '79. All of these are bought from the late '70s. And then this one too, another underrated classic. This was the last Bad Company album, Rough Diamonds. A little more of like a country rock influence on this. but it's great. The song Electric Land was on the radio. I love that song. I really enjoy this whole album. I mean, sometimes, you know, you had hit and miss songs on some of the Bad Company albums, but this, probably my overall favorite for going, you know, from start to finish. So I could sell these separate or all together. I have them up on eBay right now, starting at $50. Next up is a group called Balance. Again, you probably have heard of them. Bob Kulick on guitars. This was a 1982 album. And it actually was kind of a, I remember there were some good rock songs on here, good guitar playing, and that's usually what I was after. I'd buy things based on, oh, I heard this guitar player's good. And let's see, In for the Count, yeah, I remember that. So again, very hard to find. And here's a 1984 classic. I don't know if many of you remember Russ Ballard, but he was in a group before this, and I can't remember the name of it now, but then he went solo. And this is his classic 1984 self-titled release, which has got, I know quite a few of these songs were on the radio. Voices, Two Silhouettes, I Can't Hear You No More, In the Night. He wrote songs that were covered by groups like Rainbow. Richie Blackmore did one of their Russ Ballard songs, the 1979 album, Down to Earth. And I'm trying to remember what the song was called. And I can't remember it right now. But he wrote hits for other bands. And so he was first known for that. Almost like a Neil Diamond kind of approach, where he would be writing songs for bands to get hits, and then he went solo. So I have lots of memories hearing that from in the 80s on the radio. Here's another one of my favorites, again, very rare, Bandit, Partners in Crime. Now this guitar player, Danny McIntosh, I think he is still married to Kate Bush, and they've been married since the, I don't know, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s, I can't remember, but that's his claim to fame now. He did a few albums with this group, and this is the best one. It has an absolute classic song on here called One Way Love, which was on the radio all the time, I remember, in '79. So when I was in school in grade 10, I remember this being on the radio. And great singer who does like a Rod Stewart tribute now. He didn't really remind me of Rod Stewart though on this album. He sounded like he had his own voice. And this was never released on CD. It is not available on Spotify. And this is an Areola Records from '78. So I think that was their last album, and then they broke up. I think they did 2 albums, and that was it. They all went their separate ways. But because of that song, One Way Love, being on the radio, that's why I bought this. And there's lots of other great guitar rock songs on here. Good production as well. So yeah, great memories of that one. And here we get into my Jeff Beck. This is my only remaining Jeff Beck album, because I think I sold all the others in a bulk sale. This is the Orange album from 1972, featuring Cozy Powell, who, you know, often looked like Jeff Beck's brother. They look very similar. And Max Middleton on keyboards. And you enjoyed my tribute to Bill Withers, well, thank you very much. I had fun playing that. And Bob Tench on vocals. This is still one of my favorite periods of Jeff Beck. It's like post Rod Stewart. I mean, people rave about the Rod Stewart album, Truth, which was 1968. I actually prefer this period. There's a lot more of a sort of a funk soul vibe going on here. And Max Middleton, of course, he taught Jeff Beck a lot as far as music goes. And Max Middleton was on the Beck's instrumental albums, Blow by Blow, Wired, and he brought a lot of good writing into the band. And this is sort of an underrated album that did its due. And they did 2 releases with this band. So I think this is 1972. Oh, thanks for the tip, Petrobit. Appreciate it. Okay, next up we have here's a real old one. Check this out. Oh my God, this is like early '60s. Harry Belafonte Calypso on RCA. Again, there's no release date on there, but I do believe that is his first album, and it looks to me like it's in pretty good shape. I mean, this might have been a re-release. It's like near mint. So I mean, you take a look at this. But again, this is an album that I grew up with. My parents played it all the time. And I don't think it's from my parents. I probably bought it somewhere else later on. But it's absolute classic. I even played some of this on the street when I was busking. What song was it? I can't remember now, but I did play some Harry Belafonte on the street. So that is his first album. Then I have also Harry Belafonte Live. This is, what year was this? Again, no date. I'm guessing this is 70s. It's a 2-album set. Maybe somebody could tell me. It's got reviews, gatefold sleeve. So yeah, you can see I grew up with a lot of great music from my parents. You know, like I would have this always in the background, then later I'd be like, I need to buy this album. And I also have Evening with Belafonte and Nana Muscuri. That's another singer that my parents used to listen to all the time, Nana Muscuri. So, you know, it was either her on Sunday mornings or Heino, like German folk music. But or then Credence, you know. So I was always going through extremes, you know, the Brothers Four, Kingston Trio, and then you'd hear this, and then I'd hear Credence, Rolling Stones. So I always had a great mix of music to hear at home, and that of course influenced my whole musical development. So next up is my one Pat Benatar album, and that is Tropico. I think this is one of her most underrated albums and one of my favorites. I mean, I had all her albums, you know, especially the first one and the second one that had Hell is for Children, all the hits that were on the radio, but this came out in like '84. So it was kind of already, she'd been around for 5 years. But I finally saw her live about, I don't know, 10 years ago at least. So, and she still sounded great. So one of the first, you know, female rock singers to really come out and open up the, you know, music for female singers. I mean, there were others like Blondie that were even out before her. Okay, now we get into my George Benson collection. And I start with, let's see here, I've got George Benson, Tell It Like It Is. This is early 70s. Can't remember what year, but I was also influenced by George Benson. I used to play his instrumentals. He used to do a lot of straight instrumental guitar in the late 60s, and then he slowly started working the vocals in. But amazing guitar player. Oh, a great singer too. There's another one from him, White Rabbit. Ron Carter on here, Earl Klug, Billy Cobham. So this is also gatefold, very rare. And this is on CTI. So if you're into sort of Benson and his guitar playing, this is definitely a good place to start. And this is the Carnegie Hall concert, and again, it's a gatefold. I used to love that about albums, you know. So, oh, it's a gatefold, you know, get excited. It's like you could open it up and get some artwork or put it on the wall. And then I've got one Dickie Betts album. This is The Great Southern, and this was out in '77. So this is probably around the time he was no longer with the Allman Brothers, because they broke up a few times. So if you're into Southern rock or the Allman Brothers, this would be great. Everybody's Got a Mustache, of course. It was the law back then. Okay, not everybody's wearing a cowboy hat though. Two guys are not, so I don't know what happened there. Maybe they they probably got fined because they weren't wearing cowboy hats. Now here comes another one of my favorite groups. A big influence on me, Blackfoot. Now, I don't know if any of you remember this. This came out in '79, and here's the main reason I bought this album. I saw this back post picture. I mean, is that a cool looking band or what? I mean, seriously. Everybody was into Van Halen, I remember, around this time, and I was into Blackfoot. Like, I was just constantly talking to everybody about Blackfoot. Now, 3/4 of the band are Native American Indians, and the bass player, the main singer, guitar player, Rick Medlock, and the drummer, Jackson Spires. He was the only white American in the band, Charlie Hardwick. But I thought these guys were coolest, and this is a good example of how you can sell an album just by having the right picture on it. I hadn't heard a thing about it other than the guy who ran the record store where I bought these albums, which is where I used to go all the time every week to check out. I think I was probably looking at it, and then he said something like, "Oh yeah, this guy's a really good guitar player," and then that's all I needed to hear. And their big hits on this album, of course, Train Train and Highway Song, which were on radio all the time. So Rick Medlock was also the drummer for Leonard Skinner when Skinner started. Like the first album, he was the drummer, and then he went on to do Blackfoot. Blackfoot was never as big. And to me, I actually always preferred Blackfoot. I mean, I did enjoy some Skinner songs, but there was something about the guitar playing from Rick Medlock and his singing that I really liked. And just to me, he's one of the classic guitar players, vocalist combos. They're really hard to find guys that excel in both areas. You might have someone like Warren Haynes, who's another guy who's a great singer and great guitar player. So I basically learned all this album on guitar, playing Highway Song solo, which is, it's kind of like your extended jam session Southern style song that everybody did in the '70s. The Outlaws, Skinner, Molly Hatchet, Blackfoot, Highway Song. It's like their version of that Skinner extended song, Freebird, right? But that was not even their first album. This was actually, I think, their third album. Their very first album was this one, which is called No Reservations. Great title. But this came out in '75. This is also very rare. I picked this up in A&B Sound, which is a Vancouver store, probably around '79. And this again as well, not on Spotify, I don't think, and the album quickly was deleted and never talked about again. And that's really too bad because it is an absolute classic album, the first one. And then they went to Strikes 3 years later, and then there was their 1980 album, Tomcattin'. And this, of course, is, they had started putting animals on their covers, and that started with Strikes, with the snake. And this was 1980. Again, they got even heavier on this album. This is sort of when they were touring with bands like AC/DC and the Scorpions. And they were sort of at their peak. It is an absolute classic album. Songs like Warped and some really nice blues and Fox Chase. A few songs were played on the radio. So I unfortunately never got to see them live, and that's my biggest regret, that I don't think they ever came to Canada. Or that maybe they did and I wasn't paying attention. So 1980, I still remember buying that in the store. And then 81 was Blackfoot Marauder, and I bought this one in the States because I went down there to Bellingham or something with my dad and going through the records, and I was like, oh, new Blackfoot album, get really excited. And this again, another classic. This is the last of their classic albums. It's kind of on the Atco label. See that sleeve? A&B Sound. That's a store where I bought all my records in the late '70s. It's on it was on Richards Street here until about, 10 years ago, and then they finally closed down. But that was the street that had about half a dozen record stores, and I would go to all of them. And you just walk in and start browsing. Um, and then I would pick up these sleeves as well in bulk, you know, like 100 in a package, and sleeve all my records. And these have still got the original sleeves in them from when I purchased. Of course, they would always have their inner sleeve as well with the lyrics on it. So I was always protecting everything. But yeah, A and B, you know, great memories there. Always taking the bus in from Abbotsford where I lived. It was like a 2-hour trip. I would take my 20, 30 bucks that I made, you know, working in a chicken restaurant and buy records, you know, and then they would be, you know, $5 maybe. So usually you could get like 4 for 20 bucks. All right, next up. Yeah, I was ashamed to see all the record stores go. I had some 200 albums and left them in Michigan. Why does my chat always keep disappearing? I want to see all the chats here. Let's see. Yeah, somebody mentioned Leonard Skinner Gold and Platinum. I had that album and I sold it already. That was probably my first Skinner, was that double one. Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? I mean, you can say, yeah, hold on to the records, but to me, they're often just taking up room. And so, like, it's a question of how long are you going to keep things that just take up room? You know, and they're not getting played. So I'm thinking it might be better to have, you know, go to somebody that might actually play them. You know, there might be a few that I would be hesitant to sell. Just because of their sentimental value, like, you know, Devo's first album and this one. You know, it depends on the offer I get for it. So next up is Black Sabbath. Here's a classic, Heaven and Hell. That was the first album with Ronnie James Dio, who died a few years ago. But that was really a return to form for Black Sabbath. They had fired, what's his name? Well, who's the singer of Black Sabbath? Hey, who's the singer for Black Sabbath? I can't even remember. Ozzy Osbourne. That's it. My memory's going. So anyway, they had fired Ozzy, and they brought in Ronnie James Dio for this album. It's absolute classic. 1980, and then they followed that up with the Mob Rules in '81. Again, a great album. Quite heavy, but this is, you know, what I was searching for at the time. This is my first Sabbath album. I hadn't even heard Ozzy Osbourne Sabbath at this point, maybe on the radio, like Paranoid and things like that. But this started getting play, and I immediately was impressed with Ronnie James Dio singing. So I went out and got this. So, and then I think I got the best of Sabbath from the Osbourne years. So those are my two. And then I have also this one, which was the Tony Iommi. It was supposed to be like a solo album, but they called it Black Sabbath. But this is actually a really underrated classic featuring Glenn Hughes on vocals. So after Dio left in 81, 82, just do his solo thing, they hired Ian Gillan from Deep Purple for one album, that Born Again album. And you remember the artwork, it's like this devil baby, and it's just terrible artwork. And then after that, he got Glenn Hughes, also one of my top 3 singers of all time. He was with Deep Purple. Better than David Coverdale, in my opinion. I mean, this guy's got an amazing range. And they did this album together in '85. Again, I don't think it sold a lot. And then Glenn Hughes went through some drug addiction problems, and he got really heavy, and that lasted for another 6-7 years before he finally cleaned himself up and went full blast again into music. But he was still obviously singing great. Glenn Hughes also did work with Gary Moore in the mid 80s, like 85. So yeah, an underrated classic. Now here's one of my first albums that I bought in '78. I was into this band really before anybody in my town even knew about them. Like Blondie was still like in the miscellaneous section of the record bin, you know, under B miscellaneous. They didn't even have their own card, because you know how they'd have the card, plastic card of the band name. So if you saw Beatles, you know, you'd get all the Beatles albums. Well, they didn't even have their own card. So I was really early into Blondie. Probably I read a review of it in some music magazine, and then I had to go and listen to it. I might not even have heard this on the radio before I bought it. So this also has the original sleeve with the lyrics on it. So, I mean, what can you say about Blondie that hasn't been said already? Debbie Harry, huge influence on practically every female singer that came after, including Madonna and everyone else, even Pat Benatar. I mean, Blondie started around 75, 76 with Blondie. This was already the third album. It's generally considered their best album. So yeah, Heart of Glass, right? that was the big hit on there that pushed that album to be a million seller. So yeah, I had a Blondie poster that was really great as well. It was I don't know when I bought that one, but it was sort of like a side silhouette shot and kind of a soft focus. But yeah, I had that on my wall for a year. Now we go back to the Blues Brothers. Now, of course, everybody knows the Blues Brothers, Saturday Night Live. That's how it started, as a skit. So I was watching Saturday Night Live in the 70s. Probably it started around 77. So I was there for the prime time players, the best years. You know, Steve Martin was on all the time. And I think they started the Blues Brothers around 78, doing the skits. So I bought this album based on seeing them on Saturday Night Live. And there's the whole band. I mean, absolute classic band. Paul Schaefer, Steve Cropper from Booker T and the MGs, Steve Cropper, who went on to work with Keith Richards and the Expensive Winos. He was also in the David Letterman band for a while. So yeah, so the this was a classic because it's all live. So that was their first album. So there was a point in 1978 where John Belushi was like, he was the king of all media. He had the #1 selling album, which was this. He had the #1 selling movie, which was Animal House in summer of '78, and I still remember going to see that. And he had the #1 TV show, Saturday Night Live, in '78. So yeah, it was the year of John Belushi. And, you know, he didn't last much longer. I think he died in '82. I still remember that, seeing that on the news. That was really tragic. But Blues Brothers, classic. And then they did the, I got this one as well, 1980, the soundtrack to the film, also classic. More studio work on that one. Now I have my only Blue Oyster Cult album that's left. It's this one, Club Ninja, which in my opinion was an underrated album. I mean, a lot of people think that, you know, Blue Oyster Cult basically after like '81 went downhill, and I guess that's true to an extent because they lost their original drummer. What was his name? Albert. Jeez, I can't remember guys' names in the band. But they lost him in '81. But there's still some great songs on this. And after this, I think they didn't, and then it was basically like their last album for like 10, 12 years. I think they didn't release anything again until 1999. So, I mean, their heyday was the 70s. And I got another great one here, is Lots of Memories, James Bond, The Greatest Hits. This is a UK pressing, and it basically has all the themes from the first Bond film up until '81, which is when this was published. So really the classics. I mean, most of the best Bond themes are all from the '60s and '70s, and then it got really spotty after that. But I absolutely love Bond music, and Dr. No was a big influence on me as a kid. I used to listen to that on audio tape or I had recorded it off the video or something. But I remember really enjoying the music to that. So, big influence. Here comes a rare one. This is David Bowie, Scary Monsters. And this is RCA printed in Germany, so it's a rare pressing. And this is also in great shape. Includes the lyric sheet. And I had sold some Bowie albums around the time he had died, but still had some left over. But I think this is my wife's copy that she bought around 1980. And that's considered one of its great albums. It's quite collectible. And I know this is selling for pretty good money on eBay. But yeah, I've got a couple of Bowie albums. The other one is the live album, the motion picture soundtrack. This is a gatefold. And this is probably from a late 70s live recording. I'm guessing that's on RCA, so double album. And the last Bowie I have is, what was this called? Tonight. So one of the sort of, I guess it's 85, it's like after Let's Dance. Oh, I have that great Bowie album too on vinyl. Okay, great. So this one also includes the original inner sleeve. I think this has the, what was the hit on here? Blue Jean? I think that was the one that got the radio play. Oh, I do have another Bowie here, and it is Let's Dance. And this again is a German pressing, which also has the original sleeve. So I can get this out of here. There you go. So yeah, I've got a mix of, it's mostly Canadian, and then there's some German, and then some UK pressings, and occasional Japanese pressings. Now here's one that a lot of you probably won't know or remember, Box of Frogs. This came out in '84, and it's basically like a Yardbirds reunion. The original band, I think these three guys, the drummer, the guitarist, and the one in the middle, what did he play? Okay, maybe there's two guys from the original band here, or three. Paul Samuel Smith, Chris Dreja, and Jim McCarty. Yeah, I think they were the originals. And then they have a different singer here. Now this did get some radio play, and it has guest appearances from a lot of hot guitar players. That's why I got it. So you have Jeff Beck on a few songs, Rory Gallagher on a few songs. So it's mostly Rory Gallagher and Jeff Beck. And that was like 1984. They did a few albums after this as well, but I think the first one is still the best. Now here's one that I don't even remember what it sounded like. I haven't listened to this for ages. I bought this in a delete bin, The Boys. It's called Too Wild to Tame. And this is like biker rock that came out in 78. So I think these guys sort of came and went really quickly. They might have had one or two albums. But again, something that I used to buy always from delete bins. And that's how I'd save money. It was like, what is this? It's $1. I'll take a chance, right? What have you got to lose? So now we're getting into some fusion prog. This is Brand X, and I do believe that Phil Collins is on this. Yes, he is. So this would have been, what year is this? Again, I don't see a date. But I'm guessing it's late 70s. So if you're aware of Phil Collins' early work with Genesis, he went on to form this band, and it was some pretty amazing prog rock, and they had quite a few albums. Here's another delete bin treasure I picked up that you will never see again, Brownsville Special. Now, Brownsville is a band, they used to be called in the beginning Brownsville Station. They had that hit, Smoking in the Boys' Room. Came out in '74. That was a song that when I was in school in grade 6, we had like a little one of these kiddie record players in the room. It's just basically a built-in speaker, and you remember these things. They were portable things with a lid. that's what we had. And then people would bring in their 45s and we could play them on this thing. And I remember smoking in the boys' room getting played there, and that was the first time I had heard them. And that was a big hit for them. This came out in '78. That was their last album before they broke up, and it's still, to me, their best album. Again, great guitar work. The singer was Cub Koda. He ended up working with Blackfoot a year later and did that harmonica solo on Train Train, which was the Blackfoot hit that was on the radio. These guys had I think one of these guys produced the first Blackfoot album, and Henry H. Baum Weck, the drummer, I think he was producing Blackfoot. So these guys were connected, and I picked that up for like $1. And I think this didn't show up again. It was definitely not on CD, but I think recently it showed up on Spotify. Like, I had been watching for this album for years, and it's like, why is that not on there? But I think it is on there now. So check it out. It's great. Great guitar work, vocals. It's like rock. They're covering some old songs like what were they doing here? Down the Road a Piece. So it's a mix of kind of covers that they made a bit heavier than the originals. But again, I was into guitar, and there's an absolute classic on here called Coup de Crawlin'. Check out that riff. That guitar player also died recently. I think most of this band is gone already. Cub Koda, he died years ago, and this guitar player also died recently. Again, it went nowhere, and it's a shame. I always loved trying to promote albums that I found that nobody had heard of, and I tried to get behind it. But of course, it was hard to get anybody to buy it since it was no longer available. And I have a couple of Bill Bruford albums here. Bill Bruford, absolute monster drummer. He was with King Crimson and various other groups in the 70s. And this would have been 77 album. Feels good to me. And then the classic One of a Kind album. So, I think Alan Holdsworth is all over this album. And he's on this one as well. So you see the kind of company he was keeping, classics. So if you're into instrumental prog fusion, that's great. And I got one Kate Bush album, and it is the first one, The Kick Inside. And this came out in 77, 78. If you're not aware of Kate Bush, again, huge influence on so many people. And she's pretty well retired. Somebody played Train Train on harmonica. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, that's a classic harmonica solo on there. I used to get buy harmonica albums like James Cotton. I used to listen to quite a bit. Then I got and love songs. I saw my very first concert when I was 12 was Johnny Cash. Somebody thought that Smoking in the Boys' Room was by Alice Cooper. Okay. Yeah, it's funny how we used to think about where did that song come from, like always confusing where it originally, what band did it. But Johnny Cash, I was lucky. My parents got tickets in '74, and they took me along. So I can proudly say my first concert was a really good one. I'm certainly not embarrassed. I mean, most people have, often embarrassing stories about their first concerts, right? But Johnny Cash, I still remember this, sitting there at the Queen Elizabeth Theater, and we had the music program, and you could see some photos, and they would talk about what they were doing on the tour. So we had this little tour book that we took home. But that was with his wife, June Carter Cash, at that show. So that was a great introduction to live music. And then I don't think I saw a live concert again, probably for another 5 or 6 years. I think my next one would have been Michael Schenker, who is this guy. 1980, that's when I saw Michael Schenker here at UBC Sub Ballroom, and that's where my hearing got damaged on my left ear. It basically blew out the eardrum within 5 minutes because I was sitting up front, row center, with no protection, and it was just like getting hit with a sledgehammer in the chest. And like an idiot, I backed up to the back wall because it was so loud, but I didn't go and get, you know, toilet paper or something to stick in my ears. I was just like, I'm going to withstand this, like so stupid, you know. And of course, when you're like 18, that's what you do, right? So I remember leaving that show and I couldn't even hear anybody speaking to me. It was just like, and that was, you know, I'd had that before at other shows, but not to that extent, because usually I was way back in the bleachers section of a large auditorium venue where you were quite a bit away from the stage, like seeing Rush or something. So you would get the ringing, but it wouldn't be so bad. But that was really bad. And I remember the next morning waking up and it was still ringing, and that's when I got scared. Now that lasted for weeks. And of course, there was really nothing I could do about it. Eventually settled down, and luckily the ringing stopped. So I didn't have this constant buzzing, but the ear was basically shattered. So now if anybody does any high-pitched noise that I'm exposed to, like a whistle, it's like hearing a, you know, it just shatters and distorts and really painful. So I never went anywhere again without earplug. You know, even in a restaurant, sometimes it would be too loud. So it did get me to wear ear protection from then on. So, you know, I can still hear fine, but it just can't not take any high treble, or else it will start ringing again right away. So that's my ear damage story. Unfortunately, many of us have those. And if you're lucky, you'll get through it and you don't have tinnitus. Here's another super rare album. This one's got a bit of, I don't know what happened here, but I picked this up on probably in a delete bin, California Jam. This is from '78. I mean, here we got some of my favorite guitar player, Frank Marino, who I've also spoken to on his website, Ted Nugent, Hart, I think Dave Mason, Aerosmith. This is something that was really hard to get. I think it showed up one time on CD, I don't know, as an import. I remember when I was selling CDs on eBay and albums, I came across this on a CD in the delete bin. And I was like, I've never seen this before. I'm going to buy all of them. And they were like $1 each. So then I put them up on eBay and I was selling them. They were selling for over $100 each. So I think the money I made off those 5 California Jam CDs, I bought my first digital camera, which was, you know, crazy expensive back in 2004. It was like a 2.5 megapixel camera, like the first of its kind, a Hewlett Packard. And it was like $500, and that's why I already spent the money on that. So again, you can't get the record anymore either. And then I've got some Larry Carlton here. This is the late 70s album. Again, great jazz rock guitar player. Another band I cannot remember anything about called Champion. And this is 78. I have no idea what this sounds like. I'm going to have to look them up on Spotify. Some more classic Canadian rock. Chilliwack, of course, the hit Fly at Night was on here. Baby Blue, classic Canadian band. And they had this album as well, Breakdown in Paradise, which came out in '79. The guitar player on there, he ended up forming the band Headpins. And he's also died a few years ago. And Headpins was a huge Canadian band, bigger than Chilliwack even. So Bill Henderson, of course, leader of Chilliwack, and I think he still lives around here or on the island, Vancouver Island. Here's another deleted classic, and you know, albums were often deleted. They get this cut in them. That's how you knew they had to show this. They would slice them and then price them down to 50 cents. This had a great song on here that was on the radio, The Day the Earth Caught Fire. Check that out on Spotify. Absolute classic. It's like an epic lyrics, very dramatic, great guitar work in it. And I don't think all their music was up to that standard, but I bought this because of that one song. Okay, so we then get into another classic that I remember, Stanley Clarke, time exposure. He was the bass player, returned to Forever, and then he went solo in about 76. Worked with Jeff Beck, so he was working with Al Di Meola. Monster bass player, one of the greatest. You know, this is kind of one of the first guys that was really technical. Like he started with guys in the 60s like Jack Bruce, who were obviously really good, and then it went another step further with guys like Stanley Clarke in the 70s. And this was 84, kind of sounds like of its time. You know, there's definitely Michael Jackson influences on here. Jeff Beck's all over this album, playing some great guitar work, some good vocals. I really like this album. And Stanley Clarke was spotty for me. I didn't always like everything he did, but yes, George Duke, he did some albums with as well. So I kind of made a best of compilation of Stanley Clarke. I always find maybe 3 or 4 songs on every one of his albums, but I think this one was the most consistent one for me. And it has instrumentals on there as well. I think I even did one of these songs as a guitar instrumental on my YouTube channel. Okay, and I think I talked about this one before. This is Colosseum 2 fusion prog band, and featuring Gary Moore, who was, you know, at this time, he had been in Thin Lizzy briefly, and then he left, and then he formed this band, or he joined this band. John Heisman. Colosseum was a prog band in the early 70s with John Heisman, and I think they mostly had vocals, but then they went full instrumental prog fusion rock with Colosseum 2, and they had 3 albums, and I believe this is the 2nd or the 3rd album, and this is also a German pressing. I, again, was heavily influenced by this. I learned some of these songs because they were a real challenge to play. I mean, you've been playing basic rock songs, and then you get into, you know, Don Airey's on here, you know, great keyboard player. He's currently in Deep Purple. He plays John Lord. So this album band influenced a lot of guitar players like John Norum, who was with Europe. He was a huge Gary Moore fan. So that's my only Colosseum album now. I had others, and I think I sold those. And I also have some Elvis Costello. I still remember buying this. It's my favorite all-time Elvis Costello album. I got this in '79. It's Armed Forces. It's the 3rd album, an absolute classic. Every song is just great. A lot of radio play. Nick Lowe produced it. Still has the original inner sleeve. I can get that out of here. Yeah, so that's a great memory. I remember buying that in the local, where did I buy that? The Bay. It was at a shopping mall in Abbotsford. And that was being played on the radio, so I got that. And also this album, King of America, another classic from Costello from '85. I guess this was not the attractions, it was him and many other musicians. This is a nice mix of acoustic, rock, country, Tex-Mex, but definitely one of the top, for me, top 3 albums from Elvis Costello. Then I've got a Best of Cream, Heavy Cream. This is a rare one. I think this came out in '72. So this is a double album, so you got 4 sides there of all the best from Cream. And I still have a Best of Deep Purple here, Deepest Purple. I bought this again in 1980. I had all the Deep Purple albums, and I've sold those already. Part of my eBay purge probably 15 years ago. And I would sell off all the albums together in one chunk. So now we get into one of my favorites, and one of the ones that I would find really kind of hard to part with. Devo's first album. I mentioned this before. This is the first album I bought after I owned all the Rolling Stones albums, because I was into the Stones, and that's all I bought in the beginning. I got all the Stones, and then I got Devo, because they covered Satisfaction, and brilliant cover on Saturday Night Live. And that's why I bought this album, because I saw them like this on Saturday Night Live in '78. I was like, what the hell is that? So, huge influence on me. I do not have any CDs. No. I mean, actually, we do have CDs, but I haven't listed them yet. I'm going to have to probably do that separate. Another video of all the CDs that I have. So, Devo first album, huge influence. on many bands. And this is also great because it is the original. Remember, colored vinyl was a big thing in the 70s. I mean, check this out. That is the best colored vinyl I'd ever seen or owned. Multicolored vomit vinyl. I had albums in green and yellow, silk or clear, red. So I think I've already sold most of those. But the Devo I've held on to out of sentimental value. But this is going, I'm pretty sure, for around $50 on eBay. I mean, you can make an offer. But like I say, that is an absolute classic. So here's another one, a band, their first album, Def Leppard. This is, I think I only bought the first 2 albums and then I was sick of Def Leppard. I didn't really get into the phase where they were on the radio all the time. I preferred the earlier stuff before they lost this guitar player, Rick Savage. But they had a song on the radio called Rock Brigade, and that's what was on the radio, that song. That made me buy this album. So they were all about 17, 18 at the most at this point, which was 1980. And then, you know, they got really popular around 83, 84. And then I get to my, another big, you know, influence, massive guitar player, Al Di Meola, still considered one of the greatest guitar players of all time. This guy's been putting out consistently good work for years. And I think it's because of his hairpiece. He got a good hairpiece in the 80s, and it's obviously made him happy and kept him going. So at this time, it's really weird. You see Al Di Meola now, he looks younger than he does in this picture, which is really bizarre. And this is 77. And I don't think he was more than 26, 27 at this time. But yeah, he's a weird guy that he's like Benjamin Button. He looks younger the older he gets. And this was the album that had Race with the Devil on a Spanish Highway. And, you know, what can you say about this? This is like, you know, real technical guitar playing that everybody was trying to do then in the 80s. I've covered one song from this, and Electric Rendezvous, a really tough song to cover, and that is the song Electric Rendezvous, which you can see on my YouTube channel, where I actually play it without a pick. And that is unheard of. Trying to do Al Di Meola without a pick doesn't make any sense. But I stopped using a pick, so I just try to do what I can. But I did a really good cover of this and also added my own things to it. And I'm the only person on YouTube ever to have covered that song. So look up Electric Rendezvous cover, I think, and then I will show up. That was 82. So he got into a lot of different styles after he started with prog fusion. He began to experiment with more Latin style. He played a lot of acoustic guitar, and he's done a bit of everything, but still consistently playing really well. And here's a classic album cover. I mean, if this isn't Spinal Tap, I don't know what is. I mean, look at this. I think I actually was kind of a bit embarrassed when I bought this in the store in the 80s. I was like, really? I mean, okay. I understand that you want to have, you know, an album that is going to sell, but Dio had no shame. But that's the first album. And still has the inner sleeve with 1,000 photos of himself on there. But yeah, that's definitely a hilarious album cover. So that was 1984. I still have some Dire Straits. Like I say, I'm going to probably just do up to E or F here, and then I'm going to quit. So I've still got Dire Straits, Alchemy. This is the classic Double Live. And this was, I think, 84. So yeah, a gatefold sleeve. This is probably, I don't even think this has been played. I don't know, I wasn't really into live albums at the time. I probably bought it and then I just put it away. So this will be absolute amazing condition. And this is Again, that's a Canadian pressing. And I have this EP, which is the extended dance play album, which has got Twistin' by the Pool, badges, posters, stickers, t-shirts, Two Young Lovers, If I Had You. And that came out again around, I think, 82. So I had other Dire Straits, including the first album, second album, third album, and I sold those already. And then we have albums from another great guitarist, mainly known from the 70s and 80s work. And that is the Dixie Dregs. Steve Morse, very technical player. He's now with Deep Purple, but he started off with this kind of prog country influenced band. And I used to play and try to learn songs from this band. Always a challenge to play. Steve Morse. This is their second album, What If, classic. I've done songs from this on YouTube. Third album, Night of the Living Dregs. This is 79. Fourth album, 82. Was this 82? Oh, actually, this was before. So there's one I think I'm missing here, but this was 81. Unsung Heroes. So yeah, if you haven't heard the Dregs, this is, big technical music, everybody in the band, violin, keyboard, Steve's guitar playing, and this was their final album, 82. So yeah, I still have all those. Oh, here's the other one. This is a German copy, Dregs of the Earth, also classic. That's one of my favorites, I think. One of the top two for me from the Dregs. So they went back and forth between Dixie Dregs and Dregs. Okay, coming down here to the end. Got Dave Edmunds here, Tracks and Wax 4. I remember buying this album in 79, was it? 78 already. And he worked always with Nick Lowe. They had a band called Rockpile, which became more well known in the early 80s. But he did a lot of solo stuff. And Dave Edmunds also, great guitar player. He already started in the 70s. So again, excellent condition. And there's another band. The original guitarist from the Scorpions, Uli Roth. I've seen him about 3 times live. Met him backstage in Vegas. We went to see him in 2013. $5 for the show, and then it was like $20 to see him backstage. It was incredibly cheap. So we took advantage of that. Got back there and got to speak to him in German because he's German. So we posed for some pictures. Really nice guy, and huge influence on me. This was his first album after leaving the Scorpions in 79, and it is so radically different from the Scorpions. I mean, it couldn't be more different. It's much more of the Hendrix vibe coming through on this, and he took the solos, even going beyond what he did in the Scorpions to the next level. So again, one of the shredders from the 70s influenced a lot of people. Him and Michael Schenker were the epitome of the German guitar player, the cream of the German guitar scene in the 70s. It was these two guys, and they were back and forth in and out of the Scorpions. Schenker covered he came back into the Scorpions after Uli left, and he had to actually play some songs from Uli, because they had to play old songs, right? And he's one of the few guys that actually could do it justice. But I love this album. He was dating ex-girlfriend of, former girlfriend of Jimi Hendrix, Monica Doneman. And it's kind of weird that she would get together with Uli. Uli was a huge Hendrix fan, and then she ends up dating him. It's just a bit odd to me. But anyway, she was a painter, and she painted these covers. So I've got that one and the second album, Firewind. Again, she did that artwork. And this came out in 1980. So, terrible singer. Absolutely the worst singer ever. I mean, he makes Tom Waits sound like Emmylou Harris. I actually used to have to edit out his vocals on some of these songs. When I transferred them to cassette tape, he'd be singing 2 verses in the beginning of a song, and then he would do the solo. I would actually start the song recording at the solo, and then hopefully he would not sing again. So some of the songs I would actually take out 2 minutes of his singing. Um, I don't know what he was on, what drugs he was on to make him think that he should be singing. Um, some of it he can handle. It's not too bad, I think, on the first album, but some of it on the second album. And it's the main reason why he finally did get a singer after this album. So again, you know, he leaves the Scorpions, who had the amazing singer Klaus Meine, and then he would sing himself. So if he had just gotten a singer right away on these albums, they probably would have done a lot better. So yeah, very rare, and these are German pressings as well, both of them. Willie hasn't been doing much in the last few years. He's been very inconsistent or lazy, I don't know, but he has not released anything for years. He's one of these guys, I think he basically made it to the mid-'80s and then the output dropped off, which is not what happened to guys like Michael Schenker, who continue to this day to release good quality albums every 2 years, like clockwork. That is very rare to see older guys still doing that, you know. And Schenker is like, I don't know, 66 right now, but he's still putting them out there. So I really respect that, and that's what I'm trying to do. Be consistent, keep being creative, and keep putting stuff out. Like for the last month, I have been writing and recording and playing a song jam at least once a day, sometimes twice a day for an hour, hour and a half. And I'm going to be putting these songs up on Bandcamp as well. Bandcamp Friday, by the way, is coming up this Friday, 12 to 12 Pacific time. So if you want to support, go there and get some of my massive guitar jams. I'm going to be putting up, there's a whole bunch of new stuff already since last month. So this will continue at least for the next couple of months. This is the day that I get 100% of the revenue from Bandcamp as opposed to 90% of the revenue. So that's a great way to support the channel. Or check out the membership on YouTube here or Patreon. I also got 11th House with Larry Cordial. This is, again, fusion jazz rock from the mid-'70s. And there's another band that I saw in the 80s, Fabulous Thunderbirds. Jimmy Vaughn on guitar, the brother of Stevie Ray Vaughan. I prefer Jimmy. Seriously, I always preferred him. Especially, you know, what they did with the Thunderbirds. It was just much more concise and minimalist playing that fit the blues. I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan was more of the flashy guy, right? Solo like mad, and he was great and all that. But I really love this band. Great singer, great harmonica player, and they already started, I think, in the mid-'70s. This was their first album from '79, and I still have that classic. I saw them in '86 at the Town Pump in Vancouver. Great show. Went with my parents. We had dinner there, and that was a perfect time to see them before they broke. Well, before Jimmy left the band. And I still have this album too, Tough Enough, which was their first hit album, and it had that song Tough Enough, which was on the radio all the time. So still got those. Next up we have, there's a classic, Marianne Faithfull, Dangerous Acquaintances. Now, she was like a drug casualty of the 60s. I mean, she's still alive, but she was in rough, dire straits, as they say, for quite a few years in the 70s. She wasn't doing anything. Her first album, Comeback, was '79, which was Broken English, which was on the radio all the time. And that's where I first was introduced to Marianne Faithfull. I mean, she obviously dated Mick Jagger in the 60s. She helped write, or did write, Sister Morphine on the Stones album. Yeah, she did write it, and then first they didn't give her credit, and eventually, after litigation, they did give her credit. The Stones were absolutely the worst with stealing credits from other people. They did it with Mick Taylor a lot. Songs that he wrote completely, his name is not on them. It's always Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. So he got ripped off. She got ripped off. And she made her comeback in '79, and at that time, you know, her album was being even getting better reviews than the Stones. I mean, Some Girls was well reviewed, but I actually prefer the album that she brought out. It was really like this world-weary singer. She had lost her voice, or it had changed, you know, and I became gravelly. It was more like Tom Waits. She was very, very pure, sweet voice in the mid '60s when she started. But that was all. Yes, as time goes by, exactly. So that had all changed by '79, but it helped her career. Um, she was then able to do, you know, a style of music that wouldn't have worked before. She was doing rock songs. She had that song "Why Did You Do It," which to this day is still shocking to listen to. I don't even remember if they got away with it. I think they did play this on the radio, and she's swearing in that song quite a bit, and it was pretty heavy for that time. I remember hearing that, so it's shocking even today to hear it. So this was her, I believe, second album. After that album, '81, and you know, she's still looking pretty good in this picture. Is obviously made to make her look, you know, more attractive. She didn't look like this in the first album. She had like a smoke going. So they tried to protect her differently here to sell this. She had some great songs on this album, and I really liked her '80s output. It was a little more pop rock and not as heavy as the first album, but I still really liked it. Great producers, great musicians. The whole album is really great. And we did see her in the '90s, around '96 in Germany. And believe it or not, she was sitting there, or she was standing there singing. She actually fell off the stage right into the lap of somebody in the first row and hurt herself. It was like Spinal Tap. She ended up having then to go off stage to see a doctor while the audience waited. And I think we waited there for like an hour at least. We didn't know what had happened. And then she finally came back on, and she had to sit down in a chair to do the rest of the show. And according to her, that is a very Marianne Faithfull moment. She was always doing things like that, like falling down or getting into, you know, weird situations. So she would talk about this right there on the stage, that was a common thing for things like this to happen to her. But it was a great show. And she's still around, still releasing albums. I think she's in her mid 70s as well right now. I don't think she's not very mobile anymore. And this was the other album, Child's Adventure, and that was in '83. This is on the Island label, which was the same as Grace Jones. Again, great album. You know, still her voice wasn't too far gone. It's still melodic at this time. So it's still some of my '80s favorites, the Marianne Faithfull stuff. Here's one, The Firm. This was the band that Jimmy Page formed with Paul Rodgers in '85. So the first band that Page had after Led Zeppelin was no more because the drummer died. So this was on the radio a lot. Still have the inner sleeve. Picture of the band. So they did, I think, 2 albums before that stopped. So, you know, Paul Rodgers was obviously a great singer, still a great singer. He was, you know, started with Free. Later on, Richie Blackmore tried to get him for Deep Purple, but Rodgers didn't want to do it. And then Paul Rodgers formed Bad Company. He's still considered one of the, you know, top 3 singers of all time as far in the rock world. And, you know, there's a reason why everybody tried to get him. Jimmy Page as well, obviously got him for The Firm. And even Queen got Paul Rodgers for at least 1 album or 2 albums years ago, you know, to cover for Freddie Mercury not being there anymore. He's one of the few guys that could do it. And then I've got some Fleetwood Mac, original from the, I don't know, 1970, either 69 or 70. This has got the classic "Oh Well" song on here. So this is Peter Green, and Then Play On. So that's considered absolute classic, early Fleetwood Mac, phase one Fleetwood Mac. And they had many phases. There was a Peter Green phase, and then there was the Bob Welch phase, which came after this. Bob Welch, very underrated guitar player, singer. And see if I'm missing anything in the chat here. Yes, talk about the Broken English album, yeah. So this was, Peter Green influenced a lot of people. Oh Well was covered by a lot of people. It's a classic riff. Even Judas Priest did it. Or was it Judas Priest? No, they did another song, Green Manalishi. But Peter Green, obviously, amazing guitar player and influenced guys like Gary Moore. But Bob Welch is probably my favorite era of Fleetwood Mac because I always really appreciate his playing and his singing in different vocal style. He went on to become well known with Sentimental Lady in '77 on that French Kiss album that he did, that solo album, Ebony Eyes. But he held there for the sort of the dark ages, the 71 to 75, 76, when they were almost completely forgotten. He held it together, and they did a lot of great albums in that time. And then came the Buckingham Nicks in '75, and I still have those albums. So that was the first album after Bob Welch left, and Stevie Nicks, Lindsey Buckingham came in. So on here you've got the classics. What was the classic on here? Landslide and Rhiannon. So that's when they became popular again. And that continued with Rumors, and I still have this album. So, of course, everybody knows Rumors. This is considered the most famous period of Fleetwood Mac. Not my favorite period. I do appreciate it, but I was more into the Bob Welch years, and then I would probably be more into the Peter Green years. And I heard too much of Rumors. It just constantly played on the radio all the time until you get sick of it. The problem with a lot of that classic rock is that you just get sick of it from it being overplayed. And I was more into obscure things that, bands that weren't getting played, and that's what kept music fresh for me. So next up we have Foreigner 4. This is also from my wife's collection, and this is a German pressing from my '81. Also has the original inner sleeve. So that's a classic from Foreigner. Lou Gramm, one of the greatest vocalists of all time. I was sort of briefly into Foreigner before this period. I never bought this album. I had Double Vision, the first album, and Head Games. That's sort of where my Foreigner interest stopped. By this time, then again, it was always on the radio, so I got sick of it because it was always on the radio, and then became more ballads than rock. So I was not that interested after this. Here's another classic group, absolutely love, absolutely underrated Canadian prog band. FM, Black Noise. This is a monster album. I'm quite sure Rush was influenced by this. I've seen them wearing t-shirts from this band in the '70s. So they either toured with them or they were aware of them. But there's definitely, the whole keyboard synth thing that Rush did, more in the later '70s and more into the '80s, coming from this band. Phasers on Stun, absolute classic. This whole album is classic. It's it's a trio. Cameron Hawkins on synthesizer, Martin Deller on drums, and Nash the Slash, another underrated Canadian artist. He used to wear bandages around his head and have dark glasses and play violin on stage. So you never actually saw the guy. That's how he was on stage. But yeah, this is one of my early electronic prog desert island albums, and it is on Spotify. And they released a few more. Then they did Surveillance, which was '78. Not as good as this one. This is still the best. And then I bought this one too. I remember buying this in Edmonton when I worked in the Simpson Sears record store. I was actually working in the record department. And this was in the delete bin because I always had first choice of all the albums. And I remember picking this up around 82, 83, City of Fear. So yeah, lots of memories picking up these deletes. Always fun. And then again here we have that John Fogerty. That was the original edition, pre-censorship of Zance Can't Dance, which is called Zance Can't Dance on here, and it was changed to Krantz Can't Dance. The whole lyrics were changed. The actual recording was changed as well. He had to do it, or he was going to get sued by Saul Zaentz, who was the guy that owned all of Creedence's catalog and had been in a battle with Fogerty for years. And Fogerty basically he stopped playing Creedence because he couldn't deal with it anymore. The memories and the association of Saul Zaentz basically ruined his life for 10 years. So probably a lot of therapy and other things to finally get over that. And around this time, it was his comeback. So this is very collectible, as it has Center Field on it, and The Old Man Down the Road. I mean, they actually tried to sue Fogerty for sounding like himself, if you can believe how absurd that is. That was actual court case in the 80s. They were like, oh no. Fantasy Records said, no. Old Man Down the Road is definitely a ripoff of Creedence. I mean, that's how bad it was. So you can imagine what this guy had to go through, where he had to go to court to he argue against sounding like himself. Oh yeah, I guess I would sound like Creedence since I wrote everything in Creedence. So this might sound similar. But he won that court case. And eventually he began to play Creedence again. And I saw him like 3 times. So that was great. And then I have some classics from Free. Again, monster band, one of my favorites. This was their big one from 1970 that features Fire and Water and All Right Now, which of course is the classic that many people think is Bad Company. Still on the radio today. That probably would have been their peak album. This is their 3rd album. I have other albums from them. Free at Last. I think this was 72. So this is like a year before Bad Company. And it still has Paul Kossoff on there. He was sort of in and out of the band, dealing with his drug problems. And I have Free Heartbreaker. Again, this is a classic. One of my favorites from them. This is again also 72. It's got Wishing Well. And then my double album here, The Free Story, is also very rare. It's a best of, it's got the Free Story right up here, gatefold. I bought this originally on 8-track tape because my dad had an 8-track player and I had a portable one. And I think I bought it for $1. But that's when I fell in love with this band. And because I got, the cream of their 5 albums all in here. A really good compilation from them. So eventually I got it on vinyl as well, and then made a proper rip to cassette. But, very influential band. Not as popular as Bad Company, though they should have been more popular. Because this is really where, Bad Company stole all their ideas. They took it from Free. Great bass player, very young. Andy Fraser was probably like 19 when he was in this band. Of course, Paul Kossoff, one of the greats of minimalist playing. Like he did some solos consisting of like 3 or 4 notes. They're absolutely mind-blowing. That's on one of the songs, Come Together in the Morning. Go to Spotify, check out Free, listen to Come Together in the Morning, and check out that guitar solo. This is something that, guys like David Gilmour learned from. You could be sure of it. That Gilmour was listening to Paul Kossoff, because that's where Gilmour probably got his also more, laid back, minimalist style, trying to make single notes count. And Paul Kossoff was a master of that. And that's what I loved about 70s guitar players. They were still bringing the feel and the emotion to the music. It wasn't just technical wizardry, you know, when he started with guys like Al Di Meola in the mid 70s. Then it became like, I'm showing off and I can show you how fast I can play and all that. That was fine to a point. In the 80s, it went completely ridiculous where you had all these guys like Malmsteen playing million notes in 4 bars. And I preferred still the guys from the 70s who were, you know, they could be technical, but they still kept the feel and had that blues influence in there. And it wasn't just showing off. They were playing for the song and bringing some emotion into the music, and that's what people connect with. You know, I see that all the time, even when I'm playing on the street. You know, play slower, people can understand it. So that's the last of my. I've gone up to F, and I'm going to leave it at that for today. So I hope you enjoyed this look. And like I say, check out the link for Patreon that I've left in the description, and you can see the complete list of albums. And I just kind of want to share some memories of these records too, and what they meant to me. And so, if you want a piece of the, you know, my history, feel free to make an offer on anything and see that list. I mean, these are not listed on eBay yet, so I'm kind of putting this up first for my audience on YouTube, a shot at it, because it's going to be a lot of work to list this on eBay. Like every album with its own listing and everything, it's going to take forever. So I thought I'd start doing it this way. So anyway, I'll wrap it up for now. I've been going here for a long time. It's like over an hour and a half. So I hope you enjoy that, and I will continue on maybe next week with continuing from F, and do another 5 letters of the collection. And like I said, you know, these are all in excellent to near mint condition. I don't think you'll find better conditioned albums unless you get sealed. So, you know, except for the regular wear on the jackets, but I can give you details about anything you need to know if you contact me. Yeah, thanks for watching. Somebody's saying thanks a lot for these interesting facts and stories. Yeah, I mean, it's always fun for me to go through there. I mean, it's basically, you know, my life tied up in here, and going back all the way to the 70s. So obviously, you know, music is a big thing for me, and most of my memories are pretty sharp. Anything regarding music, I'm like really great for trivia. I collect all that stuff. Like I never lose it. It's like I can talk forever about some of these bands and the people in them and what other music they did. So I always enjoyed that with music. You know, reading magazines, because that's how we got our information in the old days. You had to actually go out and buy Rolling Stone or Cream. For me, it was mostly Cream that would have album reviews, and I would go through that and go, oh, they say this is good, I'll go check it out. Hit Parader and other things like that. So, you know, this is what's kept me going for years. And, you know, once I moved into digital, I still have all this stuff now on digital. And so it's not super important for me now to be, you know, I'm not into putting records on and listening to them that way. It's too much work. I have a record player, and I might sell that too. But I'm now basically just listening to my FLAC and WAV files, or listening on Spotify, and doing it that way. Mostly I'm doing my own music now. So not even so much listening to this old stuff. I'll do it occasionally, but mostly I'm writing and recording music every day and trying to keep that going. So again, Bandcamp Friday is coming up this Friday. So if you were thinking of buying anything, that's a great day to support. So you can check out my Patreon page for the list of these albums. You can support on Patreon. That's the best way to do it. You can do it on YouTube as well, but YouTube takes like a 35% cut, which is quite a bit. But Patreon takes a lot less, so you can, you know, go in for $5 a month there and help support this channel and all the videos I'm doing. This is really my only income. That's it. I'm an unemployed musician right now that probably will never be able to work in a club again, because we don't really have them anymore. They've all shut down over the last 10 years. So every club that you see me posting videos of is from somewhere I played in the past, and that club doesn't exist anymore. They couldn't afford live music. People were not coming there. The rents got too high, or the clubs were torn down for condo redevelopment. The typical stories All these places I played in the downtown area in Vancouver, they're all gone. I think only one exists now, the Sylvia Hotel by English Bay. And last time I played there was 2018. You know, we do 2 sets, get $100 each. And I think they're still open, but now because nothing else exists, every band in the 50-mile radius is trying to get in there. So it's virtually impossible to get a gig. I mean, I was getting like a gig once a year, and I was like, there's no point in this, you know, going through the work of finding a singer and rehearsing a set list and all that just for one gig a year. I was like, no. So I went back to the street. So that's my situation right now. I can only play the street. And I haven't played the street since 2019, September. But I am planning to try it again in March this year, once it warms up. So we'll see how that goes. But I will keep you informed how that's going to go. And I will be filming this all as well. So you can stay tuned for that return. And I also have a busking book you can buy, a $10 tip on PayPal. I give you my whole diaries of 2019, so everything I experienced on the street, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's all listed in my video description. So how did I come up with the name Shatnershairpiece? Well, it was my email name from Yahoo, which I started, I think, already 15 years ago. And I decided that would make a good YouTube name because it was funny and people would be like, what is that coming from? And also I was a big fan of Shatner's hairpieces over the years. You know, William Shatner's been wearing hairpieces since the late 50s. And I wasn't even aware that, you know, he wore one in Star Trek. That I thought that was his real hair, and it isn't. So there was a blog called it's either Shatner's Toupee blog. If you can search this on the internet, you'll find this blog, and the guy has spent years researching and doing like satire comedy about William Shatner and his hairpieces, which is, it's an amazing blog, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's got tons of photos, and they try to figure out, you know, when did he start wearing it, and they are analyzing each toupee over the years, and the really bad ones in the 70s, and then how he got hair transplants. I mean, there's this whole mystique around Shatner, and the fact that he has never admitted to wearing one is the best part, because he refuses to ever be seen without it. He's one of these guys, he will go to his grave with his hairpiece, unlike many other actors like Sean Connery, who freely admitted being bald and would wear hairpieces in their movies. Not so for Shatner. Do you know about the Halloween mask too? I don't know what you mean about the Halloween mask. What is that in reference to? So yeah, that's where the name came from. And it still gets attention on YouTube, you know, because people are like, what is this? So, yeah, I've always been a fan of Shatner in that way, and I find he has an interesting history. It's going back 50 years. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any more questions, just ask me in the comments, and I will try to answer you there. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next broadcast, which will probably be in a week or so. I normally will not start posting videos again until like this Thursday or Friday. I'm trying to leave a space early in the week. They used Shatner's face. Oh, right. Yeah, I did hear that story. That's right. Yeah, it was like a bad Shatner mask or something, and they just cut holes in it. That's right. I did hear that. I think I saw that documentary about Halloween. That's pretty funny. But I mean, it's great that Shatner is. He's like 90 years old now, and he's still in great shape, and he's still doing well. So, you know, kudos to him. What is my most expensive album right now? Probably, I don't know, maybe the Devo, according to eBay. Well, like I say, ones I would recommend from my music right now, I would say check out bands like Free. Check out Automatic Man. Unfortunately, I don't think you were going to find them anywhere on Spotify. You might hear them on YouTube if you search Automatic Man. And you'll know them by these alien face covers. I mean, that's two I can think of right now. And Brownsville, Air Special album. That's one that I have really fond memories of. and Bandit, Partners in Crime. Again, you probably have to search my channel because I'm the only one who put up this album. I did put up the whole album. So if you search Bandit, Partners in Crime on YouTube, you will find my video of the whole record audio. And that's the only way you're going to see this because it's not anywhere else on Spotify. All right. So I'm going to have some breakfast now. All right. So I'll talk to you all later. Thanks for watching and thanks for your support.